wanted to work with poems of self-compassion this evening and the recovery of innocence. I tend to look at innocence and experience as two opposing forces, and that we have so much innocence when we come into the world, and that slowly as the years go by it gets worn away until hopefully there's just enough at the end to take you through. I want to take another look at that and say, what would it be like to see it differently, and not to choose so much between innocence and experience, and to see innocence as a kind of vital force which lives within us, something that must be kept alive at all times, in all ways. I'll start with a poem by a woman struggling towards her innocence, Mary Oliver, a poem called The Journey. She's leaving the house in which she lives. In the spiritual traditions, there's always the metaphor of coming home, that you're going home somehow. But the strange thing is, in order to go home, you usually have to leave the home you're living in at the moment. So first you leave the house in order to make the journey to come back to the house. So here's Mary Oliver, remarkable East Coast poet from the States. And she says, one day you finally knew what you had to do. You know those days, once every 10 years or so. One day you finally knew what you had to do, and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. One day you finally knew what you had to do, and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do. Though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible, it was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, which kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. And there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. This determination to save the only life you could save, on the surface sounds quite selfish, but the line where she says that she is striding deeper and deeper into the world tells you that it's not. She's determined to save the greater life that is possible for her. It's the life that belongs to the world. It's the life of her destiny. And that whenever we take a step towards that greater life, there's always a possibility of betraying others, and those people will say, mend my life, don't come back, don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go. But you didn't stop, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. Mary Oliver says, you want to know what it's like when you take that step outside your house and leave that confining identity around and go out on the road of life? That's what it feels like. It feels like as if you're leaving at 2 o'clock in the morning in the middle of a windstorm. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. So somehow, against all odds, Mary Oliver is setting out on this journey, this long road to nowhere, it seems, at the beginning, and at many points along the way. All there is the beckoning intuition, the beckoning uncertainty that calls you on, God over the horizon all the time, life over the horizon, but some kind of desire in the world which is pulling out your own desire body It's an intuition of one's own place in the world, of one's own destiny. It's the feeling that you can be found by the world, the possibility of being found by this astonishing world in which we live, which holds as much beauty and as much terror as we can take, and then more some, as we step further and further into it. Mary Oliver has another poem, which is really astonishing. She starts with the line, it's a poem called The Wild Geese, and again, a poem of tremendous self-compassion and self-forgiveness. She starts with the lines, you do not have to be good. And you really don't need any of the rest of the poem. This first line, you read this poem in around Massachusetts, in Boston, where the Puritan ethic has been very strong, and 400 people line up afterwards. They want to know where they can get the poem from. Who would write something so radical? Because you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. I feel like she knows the territory here. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert, repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. But meanwhile, the world goes on. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. But meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the soft pebbles of rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over again, announcing your place in the family of things. Over and over again, announcing your place in the family of things. You do not have to be good. Amazing thing about this is that the poem is excellent. See, the poem is excellent. The poem is good. So there's some mystery here she's talking about. She says you do not have to be good. What she's saying is when you first step in to write your poem, when you first step in to write your life, you do not have to be good. You can't get there from here if you think you have to be good in order to do it. She's saying somehow that if there is goodness in the world, it comes from our rubbing ourselves up against life and testing ourselves against it and making lots of mistakes and falling down flat and doing bad things thinking we're doing good things thinking we're doing bad things, and making sense of it from the greater perspective of one's own personal destiny and intuitions of where we're supposed to go in the world. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. This is what I call a 3,000-mile only. You only, all you've got to do, you only have to let. You only. Every poem has a word which is usually a threshold. You have to really fill it with your voice. If you don't, you can't get to the rest of the poem. This only takes everything to get through. You only. We'll be here at 11 o'clock tonight. I'll still be saying you only. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. In Bhutan, in the Himalayas, I was there a couple of years ago, and there's a famous monastery called Takstang Monastery, which means the Tiger's Nest Monastery. And Padmasambhava, the apostle of Buddhism to Bhutan, is supposed to have arrived there on this cliff face on the back of a tiger. This is a mythological way of describing what the impact was of Buddhism on Bhutanese society. Padmasambhava arrived on the back of a tiger. And this Tiger's Nest Monastery, which grew out of that first hermit cell, is there hanging 2,000 feet above this cliff. And you go up and you walk to the cliffs opposite and look at it. And you see, as you look closely through your binoculars, that there are these log ladders going down beneath it. They go down and down, 100 feet, 200 feet. And at the bottom are these little monks' cells. And in these monks' cells, they wall monks and nuns up for 3 years, and 3 months, and 3 days. Probably 3 hours for all I know. But it's a tradition. They wall them up, and they pass in food and pass the food out pass in buckets, pass out buckets, and they're in there meditating for 3 years. These people obviously have a lot of meditation behind them already. They don't throw people in there right away. You go in there voluntary. But I was thinking as I saw them, I think they're just trying to get through that only of Mary Oliver's. Just 3 years and 3 months and 3 days to get through that only. Maybe you'd get through it. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. It sounds so simple. It's a tremendous discipline. It takes a whole lifetime. Follow your bodily intuitions of what your life could be. And somehow, in order to do that, you have to keep the child's body intact inside you. And yet you can't give away your experience at the same time. I mean, if you think about your own life, how many times do you set up the adult inside you against the child? That if the child's missing, the adult has to step aside so the child can come in. If the adult is missing, the child has to step aside. What's it like to have a life where they're both there at the same time? There's a marvelous poem by a woman called Nina Bogin. She lives in France. She's an American poet. She has a poem called Initiation. She's thinking back to her youth when we can all remember those days of vital youth where the whole world was at our feet. I mean, some has experienced that for long periods of time. Others, it just happened for a day or even an hour, when you were 16 or 17 or 18 or 21. Some of us perhaps didn't even get that, but we had an intuition of it, that it was possible. And here she's looking back at that, and she says, she's looking back at her youth growing up in, or at least visiting Provence, and the house, that's her first house she had to herself. And she says, at the crossroads, hens scratched circles into the white dust. Poet never leaves the details behind. Details are always important. At the crossroads, hens scratched circles into the white dust. There was a shop where I bought coffee and eggs, coarse-grained chocolate, almost too sweet to eat. When I walked up the road, the string sack heavy on my arm, I thought my legs could carry me anywhere, into any country, any life. The air, dazzling as sand, grew dense with light. Bougainvillea spilled over the salmon walls. The world could be those colors. The melon, the mango, the avocado, evening releasing its circles of moon. I climbed the pink stairs and entered the house, as calm and ephemeral as my own certainty. I climbed the pink stairs and entered the house, as calm and ephemeral as my own certainty. This is my house, my key, my hand with its new lines. I am as old as I will ever be. At the crossroads, hens scratched circles into the white dust. There was a shop where I bought coffee and eggs, coarse-grained chocolate, almost too sweet to eat. When I walked up the road, the string sack heavy on my arm, I thought my legs could carry me anywhere, into any country, any life. I thought my legs could carry me anywhere, to any country, any life. The air, dazzling as sand, grew dense with light. Bougainvillea spilled over the salmon walls. The world could be those colors, the mangoes, the melons, the avocado, evenings releasing their circles of moon. I climbed the pink stairs. I climbed the pink stairs and entered the house, as calm and ephemeral as my own certainty. This is my house, my key, my hand with its new lines. My hand with its new lines. I am as old as I will ever be. Feel that ability that Nina Bogin has to walk inside her own body and call out those memories, but call out the vitality that's not just a memory, but an ongoing, living presence within her, a kind of holy spirit of vitality, a holy spirit of engagement with life that sees every possibility and wants to follow every possibility. How do we keep that part alive, as we grow older, as we grow younger toward death? Instead of older toward death? What's the possibility of growing younger toward death? I'll stay with the women poets here for a little while. And there's a woman, Fleur Adcock, New Zealand born, lives in England. She got to about the age of 50 or so, and she suddenly realized she was going over that edge between early middle age into latish middle age, where the self justifications and things you said to yourself didn't quite work the way they had 10 years earlier. But she was lucky enough to spend a year in the Lake District. And I think it was a year alone just by the feel of the poem. It's hard to know. I don't know the full circumstances of it. But she sees her face in the mirror and sees in new lines in the weathering. And the poem is called Weathering. And here's a poem of tremendous self-compassion. You can feel just the innocence alive and bubbling here through the body, becoming innocent even because of the body growing older rather than despite it. And it has to do with her engagement with the world, with Mary Oliver's phrase of walking deeper and deeper into the world. You know how that can happen as you get older. You can get more and more experience, and the experience seems to tell you, circle the wagons. It's time to circle the wagons. Now, insurance policies, retirement funds, as if somehow there is this vital beginning to life, and then towards the end you just kind of phase out to golden retirement, doing the least harm possible to people, kind of passive way. What's it like to take a more vital, visionary attitude to growing into life, walking deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save? So here she is with this poem, Weathering, living in this beautiful place in the Lake District. She says, the wind catches my face. The wind from the snow line catches my face. My face catches the wind from the snow line. My face catches the wind from the snow line and flushes with a flush that will never wholly settle. Well, that was a metropolitan vanity, wanting to look young forever to pass. That was a metropolitan vanity, wanting to look young forever to pass. I was never a pre-Raphaelite beauty, and only pretty enough to be seen with men who wanted to be seen with passable women. But now that I am in love with a place that doesn't care how I look and if I am happy, but now that I am in love with a place that doesn't care how I look or if I am happy, happy is how I look, and that's all. But now that I am in love with a place that doesn't care how I look or if I am happy, happy is how I look, and that's all. My hair will grow gray in any case. My nails chip and flake, my waist thicken, and the years work all their usual changes. If my face is to be weather-beaten as well, it's little enough lost for a year among lakes and fells, where simply to look out of my window at the high past makes me indifferent to mirrors and to what my soul may wear over its new complexion. This is my house, my key, my hand with its new lines. I am as old as I will ever be. You feel that? She calls it out of herself. Now that I am in love with a place that doesn't care how I look or if I am happy, happy is how I look, and that's all. My hair will grow gray in any case. My nails chip and flake. My waist thicken, and the years work all their usual changes. If my face is to be weather-beaten as well, it's little enough lost for a year among lakes and fells, where simply to look out of my window at the high pass makes me indifferent to mirrors and to what my soul may wear over its new complexion, and to what my soul may wear over its new complexion. What my soul may wear over its new complexion. Usually the surrender of innocence to experience, where you make a bargain, you say there is no such thing as innocence, it's all this gathering experience which tells you to keep your head low. Get your radar profile down so you don't appear on life's radar screen. It's a kind of inner stealth technology. The hope is that you can form such a low-profile object that the universe won't even know you're there, and therefore you won't get hurt anymore. There's a possibility for immunity, for not feeling grief, for not making mistakes. And that anything that confronts us with that possibility goes into Robert Bly has a marvelous image, what he calls a black bag. He says everyone starts with a little black pouch. When you're 3 or 4 years old, it's on your belt there. Anything that scares you and you don't want to face up to, you put into this little pouch. By the time we're 43 years old, this bag is 110 yards long. It gets caught in elevator doors. You're pulling it behind you on your way to work. You wonder why it's so difficult walking to work. And this starts to work automatically. Only the subconscious will do it for us, anything that's too frightening. So that sometimes you only get the first intuition or first articulation of it, and then all you get is, wow. It flies into the bag as a kind of Doppler effect. You just hear the sound of it like a train coming past, and it goes into the bag, and you say, thank God, it's gone. The contemplative traditions say again and again, if you're going to open up to your soul's possibility for the world, you have to take everything that's there. And the poetic imagination, which is very strong in the contemplative tradition, the contemplatives were always, in some ways, marvelous poets. As the poets become contemplatives, Coleridge said that you can't start off being a philosopher in order to be a poet, but every poet turns into a philosopher. You have to, but just because of what you uncover. You start articulating things you did not want to know. Thank you very much. So what happens is this refusal to confront one half of our existence, the dark side. What's difficult about our lives, what's grief-filled about our lives, what's painful about our lives, what's flawed about our lives. And the hope is that you can just concentrate on this other side and everything will be marvelous and good. And all the time, one side of it is just atrophied. And the soul doesn't seem to make the distinction between the light and the dark. It chooses both. It doesn't care whether you do something successfully or fail at it. It just wants to know, did you do it in your way? Was it you who failed, or were you trying to be someone else when you failed? If it was you, the soul's happy. That was your experience, your failure. No one can take it away from you. Pablo Neruda, when he was looking back on the first lines he wrote of poetry, he described it this way. He said, something ignited in my soul. Algo golpeaba en mi alma. Something ignited in my soul. Fever or unremembered wings, and I went my own way deciphering that burning fire. Y me fui haciendo solo, descifrando aquella quemadura. I went my own way deciphering that burning fire. What a marvelous description of walking into life. Mary Oliver's walking deeper and deeper into the world. To walk into life as if you are deciphering some burning fire. Y me fui haciendo solo, descifrando aquella quemadura. Y escribí la primera línea vaga, and I wrote the first bare line. Vaga sin cuerpo, pura tontería. There, without substance, pure foolishness, pure wisdom of one who knows nothing. And suddenly I saw the heavens unfastened and open. Y algo golpeaba en mi alma, fiebre o alas perdidas, y me fui haciendo solo, descifrando aquella quemadura, y escribí la primera línea vaga, vaga sin cuerpo, pura tontería, pura sabiduría, que no sabe nada, y vi de pronto el cielo desgranado y abierto. And something ignited in my soul, fever or unremembered wings, and I went my own way, deciphering that burning fire. And I wrote the first bare line, pure foolishness, pure wisdom of one who knows nothing. And suddenly I saw the heavens unfastened and open. Neruda says, did you go your own way? The question is not, did you fail, did you win? I live in a culture now which is totally fixated on winning. So anything that has to do with losing goes straight into the black bag, a place called North America. The British, it's the other way. The British are great at losing. Anything that has to do with winning goes into the black bag. At least for the last 100 years it's been that way, yes. Every country has its black bag. Every person has their black bag. So the question is, are you going to open it up? Because in there, the tradition says that in there, in that place, is your only possibility for following your destiny, because it's in there that the missing side of the coin is. You know, in the fairy stories, at the beginning of the fairy story, there's a coin broken in two, and they fit together. And the resolution of the story is when the two people come with the two coins and fit it together. In this case, it's the dark side, the dark coin and the light coin coming together and fitting exquisitely. And that somehow a lack of self-compassion has to do with the inability to come to terms with this side that we've disowned. We say, I do not own it, I disown it. That is not me. I did not say that to that person at that time. It's something that just came over me. It's almost as if we'll only go out of the house when the moon is growing larger. In the first half of the month, you say, I'll come out until the 15th of the month when the moon's growing larger, but I won't come out after that because the moon gets smaller after that. And I certainly will not come out for the 3 nights of the month when there's no moon at all. If someone said this to you, you'd think this was very, very strange. But this is exactly what we say every day with our own psyches. We say, I will only like that part of me that can win. I will only like that part of me that can be successful. I will only have affection for the part of me that can say the right thing at the right time all the time. And there's no confidence in the fading moon part of the cycle inside. There's a poem about that. It's called Faith. This image of the moon appeared in the poem. I want to write about faith. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night, faithful even in its fading from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible slither of light before the final darkness. But I have no faith myself. I do not give it the smallest entry. Let this then, my small poem, like a new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night, faithful even in its fading from fullness, faithful even in its fading from fullness. What if the moon suddenly decided it wasn't going to come up the last half of the month because there was only a little bit of it showing? Hey, I'm not coming out until the sun shines on me fully. What is this? I'm going to go slow for the rest of the month. It's ridiculous. The very beauty of the moon is its coming and going. Yet we have no patience for our own coming and going. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only, you only, you only, you only, you only, you only, only, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night, faithful even in its fading from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible slither of light before the final darkness. But I have no faith myself. I do not give it the smallest entry. Let this then, my small form, like a new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. What would that life be like where you had equal faith in the part of you that was fading away as the part of you that was growing, part of you that was dying, part of you that was failing, part of you that was saying the wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time in your career? That there's some, as Wordsworth put it, some dark, invisible workmanship beneath it all. Wordsworth said there is a dark, invisible workmanship that reconciles discordant elements and makes them move in one society. Isn't that marvelous? There's a dark, invisible workmanship that reconciles discordant elements and makes them move in one society. Wordsworth's faith in this underground river of life that somehow unifies all things, and a human being is simply not wise enough and is not supposed to be wise enough to be able to see how the land lies all the time. We're supposed to make our mistakes through life. Thomas Edison, great American inventor, a person who brought the technological together with the artistic side of life. He was an amazing artist at the same time. He was a tremendous inventor, and he was trying to find the filament for the light bulb. And they were working thousands of hours to try and get the exact material that would not burn out, that would make the filament in this light bulb, this thing we take so much for granted. And they did 1,000 experiments, and the foreman of his work team was just exhausted. And finally he came to Edison. He said, listen, he said, we've wasted our time. 1,000 experiments, he says, waste of time. And Edison said, nonsense. We know 1,000 ways in which it doesn't work. Now, when we get to our deathbeds, probably the only thing we can say, with some degree of accuracy is that, when your grandson comes up and says, what was it all about? You say, I know 1,000 ways in which it doesn't work. How do you do that? And have triumph in your voice as you say it. 1,000 is probably conservative by that time. We're up in the 1,500s at least. 1,500 ways in which it doesn't work. If you look at the poetic tradition, the way that men and women have spoken about walking into this side of themselves, the image is usually things like walking into a dark wood. Dante, he began the Commedia, one of the greatest epics of Western literature. He said, Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi retrovai per una oscura selva. In the middle of the road of my life, I awoke in a dark wood. Sometime in the middle of your life, you stop trying to be nice all the time. And you stop trying to smile and pour tea for everyone. And you face up to this other fading side of you. Usually what happens when you face up to the fading side of you, all things being equal, it's an equal celebration, but usually this side of us is being crushed and compressed for so long that the first experience you get when you go in is one of grief. For all the years you didn't walk in there before, because your innocence was in there too. So you got one little part of you that closed down 10 years ago. When you walk into that part of you, there's going to be a lot of rusty locks on the door. And 10 years of frozen immobility. A lot of grief. The person who is locked in there is also probably quite angry. You have to sit down with them. They're also, in some ways, ill. That part of you is ill, is sick. It needs nursing. All these things all at once. I remember writing a poem about grief. It's called The Well of Grief. It's in Where Many Rivers Meet. And I remember dropping down into the poem. And the image was the well here, dropping down into the well. I got this very strange image at the bottom. The poem goes like this. The well of grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down, turning down, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe. We'll never know the source from which we drink the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. When I got to the bottom of the well, there were all the coins I'd thrown down previously to make a wish. Now, in all the great religious traditions, water has always played a part. You're immersed in it at one time or another. And, originally, you went under completely in the River Jordan, down, up again. You went back to the place you could not breathe, into this watery womb, and you were reborn again, cleansed. And then, that became attenuated, so you just get the touch on the forehead now in religious traditions, some of them. And then in the secular tradition, when you come to the well, you throw down a coin and you make a wish. And the wish is that you don't have to go down yourself. Because we intuit in that dark, watery hole both the source of our nourishment and the place we're so frightened to walk back into. And so we'll throw anything down there, credit cards. Anything. As long as we don't have to go down ourselves. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wish for something else. What usually happens, we come to the edge of the well or the lake and we stop. It's just too frightening to go in. There's a marvelous passage in Beowulf, this original Anglo-Saxon poem 1,500 years ago. This description of Beowulf having to go down to the lake. The story says that King Hrothgar in Denmark is being terribly bothered by this huge green creature that comes out at night, fights off his best warriors, and drags young men and maidens off to the swamp, leaving a trail of blood behind. And Beowulf, who is this 6th century mercenary, turns up on the shores of Denmark and says, I'll sort it out for you. And Hrothgar says, half my kingdom if you can do it. Gold, silver, rings. And so that night in Herod, which is the hall, Hrothgar's hall, everyone clears out except for Beowulf and his men. And this green creature called Grendel comes into the hall looking for youth, for innocence. And Beowulf engages in this titanic fight through the night and finally wounds Grendel. And Grendel staggers off back to the swamp and dies in the swamp. Celebration. Marvelous. Half his kingdom to Beowulf. Rings, gold, sword, dancing, mead flowing over. Stories. But next night something else comes out of the swamp. Fights off Hrothgar's best men, drags young men and women off to the swamp, leaving trails of blood behind. Grendel's mother. The story says it's not the thing you fear, it's the mother of the thing you fear. It's deeper yet. Deeper yet. It's always going to be harder than you think. The nourishment that comes from going in that side is going to be more precious than you could have known. But to get there, it's going to be more difficult than you could have known. People go through terrible traumas in their life. They say, this is it, God, I've learned my lesson. Let it end now. And it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. And there's no answer to it. There's no consolation. In the mythic stories, this is 3 days and 3 nights. It's always 3 days and 3 nights. He was 3 days and 3 nights in the monster's lair. He was 3 days and 3 nights in the witch's hut. He was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. Interesting, isn't it, how it corresponds to that same period of the month that the moon is completely missing. 3 nights. So Beowulf has to go to the lake, and he has to go down into the lake. This is the description of the lake where Beowulf has to go, where everyone has to go. As they called the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one knew him. They called the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one knew him. Or if there were others before them, hidden evil. Before hidden evil they live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens where water pours from rocks, where mist steams like black clouds, and the groves of trees hanging out over their lake are all covered with frozen spray and wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark. At night, that lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom. No wisdom reaches such depths. A deer hunted through the woods by packs of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, refuses to save its life in that water, prefers to die on that shore. It is not far from here, nor is it a pleasant spot. See, the English were into understatement even 1,500 years ago. Is not far from here, nor is it a pleasant spot. The bard is saying, if you think this is just a story, think again, warriors. Mother can't heal you. Your father can't heal you. Where this darkness came from, you don't know. They call the huge one Grendel. If he had a father, no one knew. There were others before them, hidden evil before hidden evil. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens where water pours from rocks, where mist steams like black clouds. And the groves, the trees hanging out over their lake are all covered with frozen spray. Feel that feeling of creative immobility, and you won't walk into that dark side. Everything freezes over. That wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help keep it dark at night. That lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom. No wisdom reaches such depths. The ordinary strategic mind will not take you down now. You cannot use your intellect to go down. Your intellect will do everything it can to stop you from going down. It loves to whisper those words into your ears to stop you going down, it says. Car payments. School fees. Retirement fund. No wisdom reaches such depths. A deer, hunted through the woods by packs of hounds, a stag with great horns, though driven through the forest from faraway places, refuses to save its life in that water, prefers to die on that shore. It is not far from here, nor is it a pleasant spot. So not only a deer, but a stag. This ancient mythological image of male masculinity, male courage. Even male courage will not take you down here. You need something else to take you down. And there's a possibility of dying on the shore. You can fail. You can die on that shore and not go in. We all know people who've died on that shore. The immobility that comes into their lives, into their faces, into their bodies. One time or another, they refused to go down when they were asked to. Their destiny required it. To bring out this well of all healing that lay down in the dark undergrowth of their psyche and their existence, and they refused to go down. It was just too scary. Perhaps they didn't have the help at the time. Perhaps they had no facility. I mean, that's one of the great tragedies of our time, is that the eldership has been broken. The eldership in which you were taught how to go down into these difficult parts of your psyche has been broken. You know, in the Druidic and the ancient Celtic traditions, these were held unbroken. You were taught how to deal with these difficult, wild sides of yourself, the selves, the parts of the self that did not fit into the social round of the everyday light-filled life. The part of you that turns into a paralytic of the moon every month. But when you come to this place in your life, there is no consolation. It seems terrible. Rilke, the great German poet, wrote about it. He said, "It is possible I am pushing through solid rock as the ore lies alone. It is possible I am pushing through solid rock as the ore lies alone. I am such a long way in, I can see no way through and no space. Everything is close to my face, and everything close to my face is stone." Everything is close to my face, and everything close to my face is stone. I don't have much knowledge yet in grief, so this darkness makes me feel small. You be the master. Make yourself fierce, break in, and then your great transforming will happen to me, and my great grief cry will happen to you. It is possible I am pushing through solid rock as the ore lies alone. I am such a long way in, I can see no way through and no space. Everything is close to my face, and everything close to my face is stone. I don't have much knowledge yet in grief, so this darkness makes me feel small. You be the master, make yourself fierce, break in, and then your great transforming will happen to me, and my great grief cry will happen to you. Poem of tremendous courage here. I mean, here, his immobility is so much that he goes right to the heart of the stone. He becomes the stone itself. And then he cries out to the universe, to God, whatever your language is, for the sacred otherness of life, to break in. And he says, and then your great transforming will happen to me, and my great grief cry will happen to you. It's a poem of tremendous courage because he realizes that at that moment in your life, the only thing you have to give is your grief cry, is that sound. It's your only gift back to the universe. And perhaps the world, the universe, God is trying to hear what that particular suffering sounds like. We don't know. There's no other rationale for it. Why should human beings go through such tremendous suffering? Why should children who do nothing to anyone in Sarajevo right now be having their limbs blown off, by random mortar shells? Why should that happen? There's nothing you can say, except you can't cut yourself off from it. You can only, feel the terrible pain of that, and you open to it. You open to whatever is there. And you be the master, make yourself fierce, break in, and then your great transforming will happen to me, and my great grief cry will happen to you. It's like this incredibly intimate lovemaking where the only thing Rilke has to give is his grief. And he gives it. He says, here, this is mine. He goes down into the lake as Beowulf must go down into the lake to follow Grendel's mother. And he has to wrestle with her for 3 days and 3 nights down there. I wondered for a long time, what was it that Beowulf could take down into the lake? Here he was with the flower of Anglo-Saxon warriorhood with him, but he was the only one who could go down into the lake. And the story says that ordinary male courage won't take you down. Then I remembered this story from my own life. I was at a bridge in the Himalayas. I was walking by myself for a few days, and I was going to join up with this Belgian ornithologist I was traveling with in a Sherpa in a few days' time. And I took an alternate route. This is on the side of Annapurna. And I got to this bridge. And the bridge had, one of the cables had collapsed. And this bridge was over a 400-foot chasm. This could have been the setting for an Indiana Jones movie. And there I was alone. And all of the planks of the bridge were concertinaed into the middle. There was just one cable going across, one at the top and one at the bottom. So you'd have to kind of work your way across. And in the middle, you had to step on all these planks, and there were huge gaps in the middle. You had to kind of swing across on the cable, and then, at least in my imagination, that's what you do, because I wasn't going to go across that bridge. And I stood there for a long time. And it was quite a moment for me, because in that stage of my life, in my mid-20s, I was I had a kind of invulnerable feeling about myself. I'd lived all over the world, and I had a very adventurous life, and I always went ahead and did it. I was always the one who went across the bridge who did it. And here I suddenly had this fear of going across, and I couldn't figure it out. I'd been a rock climber all my life. It's really unaccountable, but I refused to go across the bridge. And I sat there for 15 minutes. I sat there for half an hour. I sat there for 45 minutes. In the Himalayas, it doesn't really matter. You don't have a lot to do, from one day to another. There are no phone calls to make. So 45 minutes, an hour and a quarter. And what I did was what we all do when we come to a place in our lives where the bridge is down. You look at the bridge so intensely that you hope, simply by looking at it hard enough, it will spontaneously repair itself. And you walk across easily in full glory. But of course the bridge refused to repair itself. And I was just about to pick up my bag and go. And suddenly along the path coming up on my side was this little old Tibetan lady, and she was carrying a big dung basket. And she was picking up dung from the floor, dried yak dung. And there's very little fuel up there, 10 or 11,000 feet in the mountains. And so the yak dung, any kind of dung, is incredibly precious. They use it for cooking all the time. And one of the tasks of the older people is to go around, older and younger people, with these big dung baskets, big wide-mouthed dung baskets, and they throw it over their shoulders in there as they go. She was humdy-dumdying up the trail, throwing these things in. And she had a lovely face on her, just marvelous, wonderful, wizened, kind, marvelous face. And as she got near me, I was picking up my bag to go, and I was going to go back down the trail. I was not going across this bridge. I was going to go back, and I'd go a couple of days round, and I'd meet these people somewhere else. And in the Himalayas, everyone namastes on the trail. And you say namaste, which means I greet the God in you. I greet the God in you. I greet what is divine in you. Namaste. And everyone you pass, you say namaste. And so she came up, and she was so intent on her dung gathering that the first sight she caught of me with these big Western boots. In the East, people have much smaller feet than we do. So she saw these huge boots, and she burst out into this huge smile. And she looked up at me, and then she bowed like this, namaste. And so I bowed back, namaste. And before I could lift my head up again, she just went straight across the bridge. And without thinking, I picked up my bag and I went straight after her. And I realized, there are times in your life where the hero has to sit down. The waxing part of yourself. Some bridges you come to in life. The part of you that does it all the time has to sit down. And the part that limps across is the part that takes you across the bridge. The part of you that you thought wasn't any good, that was going downhill, couldn't do it anymore. I have this description in the poem. I have a poem about this occurrence. I inclined my head and clasped my hands to reply, but before I could look up, she turned her lined face and went straight across that shivering chaos of wood and broken steel in one movement. One day the hero sits down, afraid to take another step, and the old interior angel limps slowly in with her no-nonsense compassion and her old secret and goes ahead. Namaste, you say, and follow. One day the hero sits down, afraid to take another step, and the old interior angel limps slowly in with her no-nonsense compassion and her old secret and goes ahead. Namaste, you say, and follow. See, this is what I think Beowulf had to go down into the lake. He had developed the older, wiser, feminine side of him, and he could let her go down into the lake because it was so terrifying to the upper, light-filled male consciousness. It's the only way he would get down. And so somewhere at the lake edge, his interior, youthful, masculine hero sits down. And another kind of timeless innocence allows him to go down into the lake. So sometime or another we invite this part back in, we invite the fading moon back in. We invite the part of us that limps into our life. We take pride in that limp. We say, this is my limp. You stop trying to get by without a limp. Now, the hope is that we can be a bell which rings out absolutely clearly without a flaw in it. And so any flaws we discover in our bells, we immediately try and fix them with super glue, cement, whatever. We're covering them over. When we're simply asked to let them sound out exactly as they are, with all their flaws in them. This is our bell, this is my flaws, I stand by them. This is my flaw in the voice. This is the part of my voice that is broken in the world, and always will be. And no one's going to take it away from me. You hear Hopkins talking about this bell. He says, kingfishers catch fire as dragonflies draw flame. Kingfishers catch fire as dragonflies draw flame, as tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring, like each touched string tells, like each hung bow bell swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. Kingfishers catch fire as dragonflies draw flame, as tumbled over rim in roundy wells, stones ring, like each touched string tells, like each hung bow bell swung finds tongue to fling out broad its name. Each mortal thing does one thing and the same, selves, goes itself, myself it speaks and spells, crying, what I do is me, for that I came. Feel that? Bell just rings, and that's its sound. You drop a stone down the well, you get the splash and the ring in the well. That's the well's ring. That's that well. 15 billion years of evolution, as Brian Swims says, and this is it. You are the latest product, and yet you don't have faith in that. Somehow those flaws have been carefully placed inside us. It's almost like the flaws in marble that give it its beauty. So there has to be a kind of physical invitation. Here's a physical invitation from a poet, Derek Walcott, teaches at Yale, Boston University, from the West Indies. Normally his poems are full of tremendous imagery and alliteration from the West Indies, long, long poems. And suddenly, in his collected poems, you come across this one page, and you felt like he just got tired of himself. One day, poets are like preachers. They get tired of hearing their own voice now and again. It's very rare, actually, but does happen. And so here's this one page, and he says, and it's called Love After Love. And you feel like he just sat down and he said, to hell with it. This is what it's about. And he says, the day will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror. The day will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome, saying, sit here, eat, you will love again the stranger who was yourself. You will love again, you will love again, you will love again the stranger who was yourself. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Say it. Feast on your life. Feast on your life. So the image here is this table with food on it. And there we just allow a couple of people in the house to eat at the table. And outside of the window, with their noses pressed against the window, are lots of interior children which have been banished to the outside, and they have their noses pressed, but we don't allow them to eat. And there are some who don't even make it to the house. They're off in the alleyways somewhere. And there are those parts of us that do those awful things at those awful times, and they're off out too. We don't want them in. Sometime or another you invite them back in to the feast. You invite your pain back in. You invite your grief back in. You say everything has a place. especially you. The day will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome. Each will smile at the other's welcome, saying, sit here, eat, you will love again, you will love again, you will love again, you will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, desperate notes. Feel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast, 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 feast on your life, feast on your life. Now, the feast is so strong. It's so strong in the Bible, the image of the feast. Christ, he's always feasting. Feasting is invited to feast. He goes to the feast. A feast means the table is laden. There's not just one dish on it. There are many, many different dishes to choose from. The way we approach ourselves, when there's lack of compassion, when you don't invite people in, then all you say is, we're only having rice today. Or just white bread. That's me. That's who I am. White bread. That's me. Rice. It's just like in our agriculture, we grow one crop and you spray down tremendously on either side to stop everything else growing up. So you have an inner monoculture and an outer monoculture, and it takes tremendous effort just to keep that one identity that we think we are. You read the old Celtic stories or any mythologies or poetry, you get this appreciation for this tremendous dance, this shape-shifting that's happening all the time in life. And the only part of you that can keep up is the part that can dance. And the hope is that you can stop the world for one moment and get on it. The forlorn hope. If you can just immobilize the world in the same way you are immobilized, then for one shining moment you'll be able to get on and feel your place there. And it doesn't work, because the world will never stop for us once. It's too compassionate to do that. And of course, this isn't talking about necessarily an outer, physical dance, but an interior ability to shapeshift at the right moment. You change. Rilke said, for there is no part of the world that is not looking at you. You must change your life. There is no part of the world which is not looking at you. You must change your life, just like that in a moment. Like in the old Celtic stories, you walk through a hedgerow and Tir na Nog is on the other side. The stone opens up in the field and you walk down the stairs, and there is Arthur and all his knights, and you blow the trumpet on the wall and they all rise and come up. The hand comes out of the lake with the sword in the hand, and you take the sword. It's just one moment. The stories say that. You are 1,000 miles away from your soul, and you are also just a paper-thin veil. When you go to Iona, the locals talk about the place. They say it's a very thin place, meaning the veil is very thin between this side and the other side, between the world of dance and the imagination and of joining, and that of exile and immobility. There's that tremendous image from the Pied Piper. When the Pied Piper leads all the children into the hill, there's one lame child left outside. Seems like a tremendous description of the human condition. Maybe it's a part of being human that you can never quite keep up with the dance. And the universe wanted to find out what would it be like if there was a part of it that just couldn't keep up with it and felt exiled all the time, and that could appreciate that beauty from the outside. What do our failures look like? What do our limps look like, with that vision, that imagination? I'm going to finish with this poem. This is from the Himalayas. It's called The Faces of Braga. And it's an experience of going into a temple there and seeing these incredible faces on these wooden statues. And the wooden statues were of bodhisattvas, which are the equivalent of Buddhist saints. The bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition is someone who has decided right on the threshold of nirvana, of heaven, to turn round and go back into human life and help everyone else go in before he or she will go in. And one of the Buddhist vows is, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Sentient beings. In other words, it's impossible that I'm going to do it. I'm going to try anyway. Sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them. And so, in this temple are these wooden statues. When you see them, you see this incredible life in these wooden faces. It's just as if the people who carved them were absolute initiates, and they put the silence and the self-compassion that was in their own bodies into the wood. And we were led into this place by an old lay monk. And the place is kind of falling down a little bit. It's been in decline for a while, but it's still whole. The roof's still dry and all the rest. And the interior is marvelous. And it's 11,000 feet up in the Marcianda River Valley on the northeast side of Annapurna. And so you go in, and from this brilliant light of the glacier out in the valley, you're led into this vestibule, and as you go in, your eyes suddenly become used to the dark for a little, and you see this incredible guardian figure. Vajrapani means diamond water. Has a cutting edge of water, and you can drown in it too. And it's this figure with an upraised spear pointed directly at you, and it's with one hand, and with the other hand it's drinking from a skull cup, blood from a skull cup, and it's trampling on a recumbent figure. The nearest thing we have to this in the West is a heavy mortgage. You know that when you're driving to work or going to, the spear is right over your shoulder there. Make those payments. And it's whatever part of life that weighs on you. But one of the interpretations of this, and I think it's a shallow interpretation of it, is that these things are there to keep your fears outside. You're supposed to leave your fears outside. My experience is they're there exactly to bring up the most difficult fear you have. You know, when you see that, there's a little intake of breath, you go, as you see it, and it says, that one, take that one in. Everyone goes into the temple. Take the fading part of you in. Take the fearful part of you in. And then underneath you see the golden Buddha waving you in, saying, come in, come in. The mudra of beckoning, spirituality, the technology of the sacred here as you walk in through the door. And so we go in, you light the butter lamps, you look up, you see these faces. There's this astonishing feeling, this compassion and love in these wooden faces. Here we are with these mobile, soft, malleable faces, so often set against the world, so often set against the world. And here with these wooden faces with so much love and compassion. And I said, how can it be? I wrote this poem to get to the bottom of it, called The Faces of Braga. In monastery darkness, by the light of one flashlight, the old shrine room waits in silence. In monastery darkness, by the light of one flashlight, the old shrine room waits in silence, while above the door we see the terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, will you step through? Terrible figure, fierce eyes demanding, will you step through? And the old monk leads us, bent back, nudging blackness, prayer beads in the hand that beckons. We light the butter lamps and bow, eyes blinking in the pungent smoke, look up without a word, see faces in meditation, 100 faces carved above, eye lines wrinkled in the hand-held light. Such love in solid wood, such love in solid wood. Taken from the hillsides and carved in silence, they have the vibrant stillness of those who made them. Taken from the hillsides and carved in silence, they have the vibrant stillness of those who made them. Engulfed by the past, they have been neglected. But through smoke and darkness, they are like the flowers we have seen growing through the dust of eroded slopes, their slowly opening faces turned toward the mountain. Carved in devotion, their eyes are softened through age, and their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hands. If only their mouths curve through delight of the carver's hands. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hands to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hands to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only we knew, as the carver knew,
How the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core, we would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear or the weight of things undone. We would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear or the weight of things undone. When we fight with our failings, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief, and our lips are dry with pain. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands. The lines in our faces would be the trace lines of rivers feeding the sea where voices meet, praising the features of the mountain and the cloud and the sky. Our faces would fall away. Our faces would fall away. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death, until we, growing younger toward death every day, until we, growing younger toward death every day, would gather all our flaws in celebration, would gather all our flaws in celebration to merge with them perfectly, impossibly, wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hands. Wedded to our essence, full of silence, full of silence. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hands to bring the deep grain of love to us. If only our own faces would allow the invisible carver's hands to bring the deep grain of love to the surface. If only we knew, as the carver knew, how how the flaws in the wood led his searching chisel to the very core, we would smile too, and not need faces immobilized by fear or the weight of things undone. When we fight with our failing, we ignore the entrance to the shrine itself and wrestle with the guardian, fierce figure on the side of good. And as we fight, our eyes are hooded with grief, and our lips are dry with pain. If only we could give ourselves to the blows of the carver's hands, the lines in our faces would be the trace lines of rivers, feeding the sea where voices meet, feeding the sea where voices meet, praising the features of the mountain and the cloud and the sky. Our faces would fall away until we, growing younger toward death every day, till we, growing younger toward death every day, would gather all our flaws in celebration to merge with them perfectly, impossibly, wedded to our essence, full of silence from the carver's hand.